You just decided to keep watching this video. Or did you? Sit with that question for a moment before reading any further. In 1983, a scientist ran an experiment that quietly shattered one of the most comforting beliefs you hold. The belief that you are the author of your own choices in the exact moment you think you're making them. It sounds like an obvious truth, almost too basic to question. That's exactly why nobody had seriously tested it before. Here's what he found. Your brain may already be moving before you ever feel like you've decided anything. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet asked people to do something almost embarrassingly simple. Sit in a chair, watch a fast-moving clock, and flick your wrist whenever you felt the urge. Nothing more complicated than that. But Libet wasn't just watching their wrists. He was watching their brains, using electrodes attached to the scalp, measuring a signal known as the readiness potential. What he found should unsettle you. The readiness potential, the brain signal preparing the body to move, appeared before people reported feeling like they had decided to move. Not after. Before. By several hundred milliseconds. Your brain, it seemed, had already started the process of acting, while the conscious you was still catching up, believing the choice was happening right now, in this very instant. Think about what that actually means. The feeling of deciding might be less like a command and more like a headline, arriving after the story has already been written. A newspaper doesn't cause the events it reports. It simply describes them after the fact, in a voice confident enough that you never think to question whether it was there when things actually happened. Naturally, people questioned the experiment for decades. Maybe the timing was imprecise. Maybe wrist flicks are too trivial to represent real decisions. But in 2008, neuroscientist John-Dylan Haynes pushed the question further, using brain scanning technology far more advanced than anything available to Libet. His team asked participants to press one of two buttons whenever they chose, while an fMRI machine tracked their brain activity in real time. The results were even stranger than before. Haynes' team found patterns in the brain's frontal and parietal regions that predicted which button someone would press, up to 7 full seconds before that person consciously felt they had made a decision. 7 seconds. Long enough to make coffee, glance at your phone and forget you were ever asked a question, and still, your brain had already tipped its hand. Think about what 7 seconds actually represents here. Libet's original gap was a fraction of a second, something you could almost dismiss as a rounding error in perception. 7 seconds is not a rounding error. 7 seconds is enough time for a decision to exist as a physical pattern in your skull long before the version of you that feels in charge even shows up to the meeting. If a machine can read your choice before you can, what exactly is left for the feeling of choosing to do? Some researchers have pushed back on how far this should be taken. Critics point out that predicting a button press with above-chance accuracy is not the same as knowing someone's decision with certainty. The brain patterns Haynes found were correlational, not perfect forecasts, and simple button choices may not capture the complexity of decisions that involve weighing values, memories, or long-term goals. A choice between two buttons is not the same as a choice between two careers, two relationships, or two moral paths. Still, even the most cautious critics rarely dispute the core finding. Something is happening before awareness arrives. The disagreement is only over how much that something actually controls. So who's actually driving, really, when the moment finally comes? This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because it isn't just about wrist flicks and buttons. It's about the story you tell yourself every single day about why you do anything at all. Psychologist Daniel Wegner spent years studying this exact gap between action and explanation. He proposed something he called the illusion of conscious will, the idea that the feeling of "I did that on purpose" is constructed by the brain after the fact, almost like a narrator stitching together a plausible explanation for events that already happened. Wegner ran experiments where people were made to believe they had caused an outcome they hadn't actually caused at all, simply by controlling the timing of their thoughts relative to an event. People reported feeling responsible for things they had no actual hand in. If your brain can be fooled into feeling authorship over an action it didn't cause, what does that say about the authorship you feel over the actions it clearly does cause? In one version of his research, participants moved a cursor jointly with another person and were occasionally led to hear a word related to where the cursor would stop just before it happened to stop there by chance. Even though the outcome had nothing to do with them, many participants reported a distinct feeling of having caused it. The sensation of authorship, it turned out, could be manufactured almost independently of whether any actual causing had taken place. That should give you pause the next time you feel absolutely certain you meant to do something. Consider your own daily life for a moment. That decision to check your phone, that choice to reach for a snack you weren't even hungry for, that moment you said yes to a plan you didn't really want to join. Did the decision arrive the instant you noticed it? Or had something already been quietly building beneath the surface, long before it surfaced as a thought you could recognize? Here's the part almost nobody considers. This doesn't mean you have no control at all. It means control might not work the way it feels like it works. Libet himself, after decades of controversy, offered something almost like a compromise. He suggested that while the impulse to act may begin unconsciously, you might still retain something he called free won't, the ability to veto an action in the brief window before it happens. You may not consciously start the reach for a second drink, but you might still consciously stop it. That's a strange kind of freedom. Not the freedom to originate, but the freedom to interrupt. A strange, narrow, almost invisible kind of freedom, and yet perhaps the only kind you ever truly had. Think about how differently that reframes willpower. Maybe willpower was never about generating better impulses in the first place. Maybe it was always about catching the impulse already in motion and deciding, in that narrow final window, whether to let it run. Elite athletes describe something similar. A boxer doesn't consciously plan each punch mid-fight. The body moves first, trained by thousands of hours of repetition, and the mind's job becomes noticing when to hold back, not when to swing. This raises an uncomfortable question about blame, too. If a decision begins before conscious awareness even arrives, how much of what you call choice is really deliberation? And how much is your mind simply reporting a decision that unconscious machinery already made? Some researchers argue this changes nothing practical about responsibility. Society still needs people to answer for their actions, veto window or not. A world where nobody is accountable because the brain decided first quickly stops functioning at all. Others argue it should reshape how you think about habits, addiction, and impulse, treating them less as failures of moral character and more as a battle fought in milliseconds, most of which are lost before you're even aware the fight began. A person struggling to quit smoking isn't necessarily weaker than someone who never started. They may simply be fighting a battle whose outcome was largely decided before their conscious mind ever entered the room. So the next time you feel absolutely certain you just made a decision, right now, in this exact moment, pause. Ask yourself how long that decision might have actually been forming, quietly, beneath your awareness, before it ever reached the surface as a thought you could call your own. Notice how convincing the feeling is anyway. That's exactly the point. The illusion isn't a glitch in your thinking. It's smooth, seamless, and utterly convincing precisely because it was never designed to be questioned in the first place. You didn't choose to keep watching this video the instant you think you did. Something in you had already leaned toward it, seconds before you noticed leaning at all.